right, Two Sketchy Dudes, episode 4. Today we're gonna talk about pet portraits. Both Lee and I will show you an example of one each that we've done, and then we're gonna have a sketchy shout out in the middle, and we're gonna wrap it up with questions for Ask Two Sketchy Dudes. We hope you enjoy.
Okay, today we're going to talk about doing commissioned pet portraits and animal sketches. And we're going to talk about the different approaches that Eric and I take, and how we kind of start from a good starting point. For me, it's often the photograph, and then how we make steps, what the various steps are through the process. So we've got some digital images to show you, and Eric is going to show you a pencil sketch. I've got a digital sketch that I've done, but also included one of my oil paintings from '03 that I just wanted to show you a little something about size in the frame, because this is a portrait that's bigger than the dog's head.
And Lee, one of the things that we were noticing, and we were talking a little bit before this, you had talked about this particular dog, and one of the interesting things about it is you have the size of the head is right out to the edge of the frame. Can you talk about why you did that?
Yeah, that was very deliberate. You would normally, on any portrait, want to keep some space around the object, some air or some part of the canvas that's free of the distraction, because that just makes it reduces the amount of tension that you get from edges touching. This particular dog is named Jessie, and it was one of my dogs, and this dog was constantly in your face, meaning that way too close, did not respect social
uncomfortably
distance.
Close.
Did not respect personal space at all.
So
this dog greeted everybody right in your face, and so I wanted to remember that aspect of the dog, and so when I did the composition, I specifically pushed the edges of the canvas. And so when you're looking at this, you say that this dog is just a little too much energy. And so that's part of what you need to think about when you're laying out your composition. And
especially, Lee, like I'll jump in for a second, especially if you want this to be something that you remember, that's very personal to you. And this dog was such a wonderful dog for Lee and Susan and their family. And this is the way I remember Jessie as well. I mean, and he's captured it because of breaking a little bit of the traditional rules of portraiture.
Right. And so that can be your message. If you can break rules if you're doing that for a specific reason. And so the specific reason here was to just say that this painting's a little too close. There's some tension, and this is in all our intersections of geometries create visual tension. And so this part of the fact that it's next to the ear on this side and the ear on this side creates tension for it. The other thing that I was experimenting with here back at this time was creating geometry or turning around subject matter breaking it down into different geometries. So you can kind of see a lot of the harsh lines and a lot of line work. This was an early part of my development of pet portraits.
It has almost a basic level of cubism to it in terms of what you were talking about the geometries. You can see very specific planar developments with the colors that you used here, and the shapes are very geometric.
So that's the only reason why this one was here. Just wanted to share that with you because it's one of my favorite portraits. I was able to take the picture. It was my dog, so I was able to find the right image and took hundreds of pictures to get exactly the right image. You don't always have that luxury when you're doing a commission for someone. And so, Eric, you've done commissions for people where they might send you just one photograph or maybe just 2 or 3 photographs, and you have to pick from that.
That's right. And sometimes you pick from the one that you always hope for a lot of shade and shadow, and that's what's wonderful in this image. You've got a sun side, you've got a directional light angle, very much so from the upper left going to the lower right, and Lee has expressed that way through that drawing. That's what you hope for in almost anything, whether you're doing very photorealistic drawing or something that's a little bit more abstract in terms of its overall look. That's all dependent on kind of the image that you get. You can add in some more light and dynamic to it. Again, these are works of art. We're not creating a photograph. We're not taking a picture.
Yeah, take a picture. I might last a little.
That's right. So, we're not doing that. We are drawing and we're creating art. And the art is the expression from inside of you into what you are creating. And if you're doing a commission piece, there may be some different boundaries that you've set up with the owner, off the bat. Maybe they want something that's very, very traditional, very structured, very highly finished. Maybe they want something that's a little bit looser, that has, kind of a more free-flowing quality to it. Something that where they remember their animal or person, in a specific way.
Yeah, that's a great point. This one was early in my development, but when I painted this one, I did not have the confidence to paint people, and so pets is an easy way to get started into doing portraiture because pets really don't get mad at you.
Yeah.
If you mess it up, if you get their eyes slightly off center or something like that, the owners will know it, but the pets.
But it's not as noticeable as human eyes. When you mess those up,
yeah,
it's very noticeable.
People and the pet's not going to bite you. One other thing that I want to just kind of use this as an example to bring out is this dog was not orange, but there is just pure orange paint here. There was no green in this dog, yet there are greens that I'm using here to help define it. This green is deliberately put in there to recall these corners of the canvas. There is blue on this side for the shadow. So use colors that together will make a composition of that help you understand that this was a brown dog. But there's only a little bit of actual brown color in there. So take liberties with it and with your color. And then just to reassure everybody that this is an actual sketchy dude work of art is I use line work to define. And so I would use a flat brush as to create line work that define edges. So that's all I really wanted to cover on that.
One quick thing I wanted to add on this, and I just want you to pay attention. You're going to hear us talk about almost every single episode how important shade and shadow are into any drawing. And I want you to see the way Lee used blues and purples in this. As he says, a brown color to the dog, you can see that, but you can see, especially in the lower area where you've got the browns working into a nice deep purple, and then you've got the purples that move into the blue that's inside the tongue. It's a much more expressive, much more artful color for shadow than just like a pure black. Now, I do most of my drawings in monochrome, fountain pen sketches and drawings, but in the color work that I've done too, I've tried to be careful to look at the edges of blue and really letting your shadow have as much life as the color of the rest of the drawing. So that's something to pay attention going forward.
That's a great point about highlights and shadows. The ideal scenario here is that you pick up on the sunlight being on this dog's right side, the left side of the canvas here. And the way that to make that look like a warm sunshine is to have a cool contrast to it. So these cool colors on this side actually make that look warmer than it really is. So that's just a trick that you can employ to, if your intent is to highlight the cool side and that's predominantly in your image, find one other segment that's in sunlight to make extremely warm and overdo it. So we've talked enough about that. What I thought we could do now is I'll talk about a recent pet portrait that I did that was a commissioned work that I started from a photograph. And I had one photograph to work from. So I will show you how I used my iPad. And this is the original photograph that I started with. And this dog's name is Lola. I haven't met the dog, but I understand good dog. Generally. Good dog. All dogs are good.
All dogs are good.
And so the process is I bring it in from email into my iPad, and I take that photograph that you just saw, and I tone it back because Eric and I are architects, and we have the luxury as architects of using something called trace paper. And when we do architectural drawings, we use trace paper and layer them on top of each other and trace things. So this particular one, when I was doing work in oils, I just sketched everything with a pencil on the canvas and just eyeballed it and sketched it. And then I would sketch it again with a paintbrush and build it up like that. I'm a lot older now. I don't have that much time. So I use a method on the iPad where I just tone back the original photograph so that it's essentially like trace paper. And I set up a separate layer, and I start doing an overlay sketch with line work, and so that is with the that's the line work that I created after sketching over the photograph.
And one of the things that I love to see in that line work drawing, to me, that's a very architectural sketch. That's geometries, basic geometries defined, center lines kind of shown. He lines up where the eyes are going to be, trying to get the basic structure of how to create the dog that will look like the image that he has.
Yeah, I'm breaking it down just like here. I'm breaking it down into planes and volumes. And so I have to get, there's a little bit of further right at the center of the chest. The feet themselves are just clunky forms at this point. And then the nose itself, you have to be careful whether you're tracing or anything. You do have to be almost perfect with the eyes. And that's
the windows to the soul.
That's one requirement that you just need to practice and get good at, because there's no way around that. If the eyes aren't there, then you'll want to try again. So that's the next step. So the first step being me taking the image, and you can see I recentered the dog in the frame where the photograph was off center. I recentered it and created the sketch. This one is where, and we'll display it on the screen, but this is the next step where I have used the program that I'm using, which is Procreate, to create some painting on this, and you'll see that it doesn't necessarily perfectly align with the sketch. I have the sketch layer turned on, and then I'm building up the paint slowly in a very rough format. And it respects the line work, but it's not necessarily constrained by it. So I'm starting to build up the background. This is one where I have really refined the painting work. I still have the Sketchy, the original sketch layer turned on, but I'm putting more detail into the nose and into the eyes. But it's still, the sketch is there for me to as a guideline, and that's something about working in Procreate, is that you can change your layers.
And as you're doing that, Lee, what are you thinking about in terms of the color? I mean, you're adding a little bit, but are you thinking of that into the final process at this point, or are you just still kind of going for it, with just kind of tones right now, basic tones?
So that's a very good question, and I am actually picking colors here to be a little more realistic and less abstract. When I'm doing commissioned pet portraits, I tend to be, and actually maybe this is just more recently, I've developed into this mode where I'm being a little more realistic with the colors and less abstract, like that one. So with the colors, I'm using Procreate to pick the colors specifically based on the photograph. So you can kind of see here what I've done. This is the final image that I used here. And I have, so it essentially looks like a painting, but I have left the sketch layer turned on, and that adds a nice effect that you could turn off the sketch layer, but I have left it on to just kind of keep some interest in it. So that's basically how I will set up a pet portrait on my Procreate program on my iPad. And just so you know, since I can manipulate layers on here to create a different background. So this one was not really working out well. So you can do different things in the computer than you can when you're using graphite on a piece of paper, and so it's a little easier. And I'm the kind of person where I really focus more on the final outcome. I'm really very interested in the final product, the final work of art. If there's a tool that allows me to do the work easier, I do the work easier. And for example, tracing this thing, I have the experience in blocking out a pet portrait and a human portrait just on canvas with a pencil, but that just takes time. And so I'm finding things that work for me that cut down the time that I spend doing something I'm not interested in.
And this is where we give you the platitude of spending time up front saves you time at the end.
Yeah.
Lee talked about that, and you don't have to. I mean, some people will literally do an underlay of a sketch that is literally a beautiful, a pencil sketch and shade and shadow study before they actually go ahead and put the paint on. And you can do that. That is something that is possible, but we're not saying you have to go necessarily to that level. But like you said, if you want to get the eyes right, get them right in your sketch phase, not necessarily in your paint phase. You can always make the adjustments on the fly, but take the time. Check out your spacing, look at everything, check both horizontal and vertical markers to make sure that everything, the nose, the mouth, everything line up. Obviously with a person or a pet, if you're doing an image that's straight on, you've got a lot of symmetry that you can deal with in your vertical axis. So you just need to make sure you're unfolding the page and making sure your eyes are the same distance apart, your mouth, the lips, everything, the chin. Vertically, you just have to establish things so your nose isn't too long or too short. You'll feel it when you're looking at it. If it feels not quite right at the very beginning, work on that until you get it to a basic good level, and then you can start your paint process.
Here's a pro tip. You want to make sure that you're accurate with the eyes and the symmetry of the face, but always make sure that you get the pet's specific coloring pattern accurate to that pet.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, especially dogs, the coloring pattern, unless they're monochromatic, is going to be asymmetrical. That is critical that you get that right as well. Don't try to make it look symmetrical if it's just off a little bit. Make it a little bit off because the owner will immediately recognize the patch of brown around this eye is a little bit bigger than around that eye. That's so I don't want to scare you off, but those are two things that pet owners will see and react to when they see your work. So that's so we talked about two different methods of doing pet portraits. One just oil on canvas, one with digitally, which are two extremes. But you've got one that you've done that's in pencil. And
I do, and I'm looking for my phone, and I don't know where I set it. So we will cut here.
Your phone is right there.
There it is. So that's where it is. We're recording with that, so I'm going to need to get that. And we will get back in that segment in a minute. All right, we're back. We just saw Lee discuss a digital painting of one of his pet portraits, and I'm going to walk you through a medium that's a little bit different, that I don't do as much, but I do a little bit with, is graphite, a graphite pet portrait for me. It was very personal drawing. This one in particular was my mom's dog, a wonderful Springer Spaniel named Daisy. Probably one of the best dogs I've ever been around in my life, and a true treasure for my mom.
Except maybe a couple of my dogs.
They're good. They're good, but they're in your face. This is a dog that I knew intimately and personally and loved, and so when my mom, I wanted to give her a present with a wonderful drawing, and so this has a lot of sentimental meaning for me.
So she didn't pay for this.
She didn't pay. Well, no, she paid by dealing with me all the time. And so what I'm going to show you is the series that I had gone through. I actually this drawing was done several years ago, and luckily I did take some pictures along the way.
So you were working in graphite on a tablet of paper.
Yeah. So a 9x12 paper, and what I used is this Rotring Rapid Pro. 0.5 lead mechanical pencil. This is all I ever use to do my sketches. So.
No other pencils.
No, I know you had shown in one of our episodes your barrage of pencils.
You didn't use a fuchsia pencil?
Didn't use a fuchsia?
Okay.
And I didn't use the pencil from Home Depot.
Do you change out the lead in there?
No, a 0.5. I use a 0.5 HB lead all the time. So I always kind of keep that middle of the road lead. I don't go too, it's not too soft or too hard in terms of the the line quality, but the HB I find is just perfect for doing light lines to start with, and then come back in and darken it up.
Which is amazing when you see the work of art. It's amazing that he's able to achieve such variation with just that one lead.
What I would say is when we look at the picture that I start out with, this is the basic block out, and you can see I've roughed out some of the some of the areas with just a little bit of basic hatching, but then I start in with the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, trying to get those set up the right way so that when I'm looking at the photograph, that I know, and I don't know if this will read well, but I'm trying to really focus in on some of those early features. And so that I know if those feel correct, then I know I can go on and probably have a fairly successful drawing.
How much of this is practical in terms of working from left to right on the piece of paper?
I'm glad you brought that up. You're going to always see, probably from my drawings, most of them, because I'm a right-handed drawer, but I'm a little bit odd in that I curl my hand completely over when I write and when I draw. So
you're kind of a right-handed lefty.
Yes, I think there's a little bit of both. Hopefully the left side is a little bit more creative, but I try not to smear my drawings like any of you righties going that way. Lefties, obviously, when you draw and you try to keep your hand curled over, you're trying not to smear your drawing, especially in graphite. But also in wet pen ink, you deal with that as well. So when we go to the third image, you start to see I'm starting to get a little bit of ear, the ear work, in here, and just kind of setting up some value that goes with a lot of the hair that goes around these beautiful ears of the Springer Spaniel.
So let me ask you this. You mentioned you started with the eyes and the nose. I do tend to start with the high risk, or the things I'm most intimidated by in the subject matter. I do, and so similarly, I'll start with the eyes. But if there's something about the ears that I'm really intimidated by, for some reason I just tackle it first, because I know if I have to start over, I have to start over.
Yeah.
And so I'll go just head first into the part I'm most concerned about the drawing.
Here's where Lee and my drawing style is a little bit different, because if he needs to go back, he can hit the back button. Eric doesn't get the chance to do that. He uses true. Stadler Mars plastic eraser.
That's your undo button right there.
This is my undo button. This is all I have. The high risk zones, I work on those first because I don't want to go back and erase a lot after I've gone deep into the subject. Because for me, trying to blend those areas back in, if I mess up the eyes and I come back later on after I've created a lot of the shade and shadow and the tonal values throughout the face, it takes a lot to blend that back in and get it to look right, to get it to look like it matches what was there before. Because every time you stop and start a pencil stroke, you end up with the 2 points not necessarily meeting each other, and you can tell that, and that's that's a little bit of a challenge. I've been working with some person portraits now, I guess, where I'll start on the left side and I'll just work from left to right completely, and not even, I'll do just a real basic outline of the eyes, but I won't go in and do those high risk areas, and I'll just move left to right, and that's extremely challenging for me because I can mess that up. But it's fun when it doesn't mess up.
That's an amazing thing to witness, and I've been able to witness that in person. He's like a printer, and it's
old
like,
top matrix.
It's like if you've seen it come out of the printer, and you think, okay, that looks good. It looks good. It looks good, and then he perfects it just going across from left to right, and it's an amazing thing to see.
So as I continued to develop, I did work the whole left side of the ear to kind of get the basic setup. And then now I'm starting to feel very comfortable with the way the overall image is going. Now I just need to do what Lee said and he talked about with his drawing, and I wanted to show you in this particular image, the nose with the spots on the nose, they are not symmetrical. They are a little bit different. They're a little bit off. And so if you take a look at that right now, that's one of the things that's the important part right there, to give the distinctive look to this particular dog that, in this case, my mom will certainly recognize.
So your mom has, for years, looked at that nose and so even if she doesn't understand immediately that the drawing has them incorrectly, there's just something that will intuitively tell her that it's not quite Daisy.
And next page, I've darkened the eye a little bit more, and I'm still kind of going back and forth. I like the value of the nose, starting to get the center hair at the top and the wave and the just wonderful thick brown hair that was always so soft to rub on the top of her. Next image, I'm starting to fill out the face a little bit more all the way through with the darker hair, the lighter area around the muzzle. Obviously the markings there are critical, and those are distinctive and the look for what now we're getting to both ears, kind of having the base getting some of the darker tones in the ears, and really trying to fill out the face a little bit more, starting to get the darkness that the shadow line that the ears create on both sides of the face.
That's what I wanted to ask ask you about is so in graphite, which I have never been successful with, in graphite, there is a point at which you'll have to commit to what is going to be the most dark part. Do you make that your last thing that you actually emphasize the darkest? Or?
That's a great question, and no, I don't. I try to. You can see I'm not even close to being done with this, but I'm really starting to get those dark values to work. But what I'll do is squint my eyes and look at the initial photograph, and I'll squint my eyes to get to a point where I just see tone, where I just see value. And it takes several iterations of working back and forth. Oh, I work the shadow under the ear. Now the eye is too light, so I'll darken up the eye. Then I need to go back and work at the top of the head. Those are things that you do as you go through, and that's a great. Now obviously you can see the left ear. I'm starting to add in the lighter tones along the hair on the ear, and it's starting to work pretty well. I know that I'll probably have to come in and darken up a little bit more of the darkest parts of that again. Making sure the dark in the face to the mid tones along the nose to the lightest point, and then to the dark nose again. Make sure all of those things are following. Show you the final image in the frame with the collar, and I just signed it and dated it, and my mom got it framed and pretty happy with it.
So let me ask you about the way you work graphite. Graphite, many artists who are trying for realistic images in graphite will do a lot of blending, and we'll blend the graphite and get different tones. And there's some of that going on in this image, but there's also a fair amount of line work, because when you're trying to draw fur, you actually need line work to convey the fur itself. So what was your balance, and what was your attitude towards blending the graphite versus doing line work?
Well, that's a great question there. Actually, there is no blending on this drawing. It is 100% just pencil lines. But the 0.5 lead is robust enough and fine enough. But even as you write with that, it does get flattened a little bit. And so when it flattens out, that's where you see a little bit more of what you're calling the blend in here. And when I rotate it just slightly, you get back to a razor fine edge, and it is as thin as a 0.3. As you're writing. All that stuff aside. I pretty much don't ever blend my drawings. I'm too nervous to do that, because I'm afraid that the work that I do, when I wipe that away, I'm going to have to draw back over that, and that's not my process.
Anybody who's as skilled as you are, who have logged as many hours doing graphite artwork, they will intuitively know and how to rotate that pencil.
Yeah.
And because you will feel it, you want a broad stroke, and then I want another broad stroke, and then I want to get a sharp line there, then you'll just intuitively turn the pencil. So let me ask you this, and I think that self-analysis is good, and so I like it when we take stock of what we're doing in terms of, so I'm going to ask you where you feel like this ranks in terms of the artwork you've created, but I'll share my own self-assessment. The digital painting that I did of Lola is one of my favorites. I'm really proud of it. I think it really is successful in what I tried to do. And what I was trying to do there was create a digital painting that had some references to the sketching. This painting that I did in oils is one of my all-time favorites, and hopefully the kids will bury me with this someday so I can take it to the hereafter. But that's the one that the digital one that I did of Lola represents who I am now, and this represents who I was years ago. So you will, as you and many of you are experienced artists out there, will look at artwork that you've created over the years and say it's almost like a self-portrait, even though it's a drawing of something else, and just say that's where I was at that time. Where I was at this time is I was using geometries and I was just playing with cool colors. Now I'm at a different place where I'm trying to get a little more realism in it, and so very happy with these. How do you feel like this one ranks in terms of what's your comfort level with this output?
This was a drawing that was done before I got back into fountain pens. I had done a little bit of fountain pen drawing when I was in college, and took a fountain pen with me on our trip to England when I was in college back in the late 80s. This was drawn in kind of a big gap between my use of fountain pens, and now I'm almost exclusively a fountain pen sketcher, and I absolutely love doing that. I love this drawing because it's so meaningful for me to give this as a present to my mom, and that's Lee talked about in our last episode when we were in Oakland Cemetery. What we drew was fun, but being there was the experience. So drawing this was fun, but giving it to my mom was the experience. And that was, the fact that my mom now has an image of her favorite dog, with her, that's what it's all about.
That is a great point. And that occurs to me often, I guess. And maybe it's, so the result, the actual work of art itself was meaningful in this case. The experience of creating the artwork at Oakland Cemetery was the true deliverable in that sense, and that's great. Good deal.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed it.
This week's sketchy shout out goes out to Rod Hallowell, wonderful gentleman in Sydney, Australia, who works with his hands creating leather masterpieces for the pen world, both journals, pen pods, and these pen rolls. And so we'd like to show you a little bit of his work. We've gotten a little bit of this from him, commissioned him to do these. This is my beautiful Conan the Conid pen, one of my favorite pens, and I keep it in one of the pen pods that he's created. Absolutely beautiful piece of work here. Easy to get the pens in and out of, and absolutely beautiful stitch detailing going around. Another pen pod here. This is a newbie to me, a new Mont Blanc, and we'll talk about this a little bit on an episode. We'll probably ink that bad boy. But again, this one's a little bit of a suede finish, and again, the nice detailing, beautiful work there. This is my absolute favorite thing right now for my pens, and it's my sketchbook holder. He did a wonderful job fitting my Lecce Term 1917 journal in, and wrapping that in the same wonderful suede leather. This is where I keep all, this is my sketchbook with all my little ditties in it. And it's got a great pen holder right there, so I can take one of them that I know that I'm going to be working with that day right with it, and a beautiful attachment to that. Again, just fabulous details around the corners, nice edging, great stitching, and super work. And then this is, Lee mentioned this in one of the earlier episodes, this is his pen roll, and I've got one as well. And these keep, a wonderful assortment of pens in here. Great stitching, again, beautiful corner and edge details all the way around. Just thrilled with his work. So check him out. We're gonna give you the information right here. Caroline, our producer, is going to be putting the information in here. Rod Hallowell of Rod's Pods in Sydney, Australia. We love your work, and thank you so much.
Welcome to the segment we like to call Ask a Sketchy Dude. We have been receiving a lot of comments on our YouTube channel, and we appreciate that. We like the feedback. And so we're going to go through a couple of them here and try to address them as best we can. So on episode 3, Gary Martin asked or mentioned, Eric, love the Husker hat. Definitely the way to go sketch. What's up with that?
Gary, big shout out for our Huskers. He was one of my buddies from undergraduate school, one of my architecture design buddies, and is still in Lincoln. And go Big Red all day long, every day.
And you're representing today?
Today is the Colorado Rockies. My son plays in the Colorado Rockies baseball organization.
Okay, enough of that.
Sorry, Pollock.
I would like to hear more about drawing line weights and how you define object being sketched. So that's a great question, because we handle it 2 different ways, and defining the edge of an object can be done in a couple different ways. I do use line weight often with a broader stroke of a paintbrush or a pencil or a heavier weight pencil to define object lines and the edges of objects. But you handle it differently. Yeah,
with Lee a lot of times is using a painted edge or even a heavier drawn graphite edge. Both in my graphite and my sketch ink work, I typically don't use line weight. It's a singular line weight, both with the pencil and the nib of the pen. But what I do is when I space the lines closer together, it gets darker. When I space them further apart, it's a lighter value. So I just handle a lot of my tonal changes that way with a distance between lines.
So we've received comments. Not any criticism yet, but
No.
no hate mail yet, which we don't encourage. But what another amazing thing that's happened is people have been sending us sketches that they're doing.
Yes.
We love to see that. And you got one from Rob?
Yep. From Rod Hollowell, we from our Sketchy shout out today. He sent us a great drawing of what we had sketched in Oakland Cemetery. So we encourage you guys to send in more of those, and we'd love to see what you guys are doing out there, because I know there's a lot of good work going on.
Yeah, keep the questions coming, keep the comments coming, but bring us sketches as well. That'd be great.
And have a blast.